Excuse me. Thank you all for joining us this afternoon. Today we're releasing the body-worn camera footage and 911 audio calls from the tragic shooting of Walter Wallace Jr. This is one important step in our commitment to helping us reach a speedy and transparent resolution for Mr. Wallace's family. While this is a crucial piece, please know that this is not the final step in that process. We ask for everyone's patience as the full investigations are undertaken. Investigations that are done right take time, and everyone involved are cooperating fully to help move this process forward as quickly as possible. As we work to be fully transparent about the events leading up to Mr. Wallace's death, I ask all of us to work together to ensure this moment does not lead to further division in our communities. We understand that the materials released today will be very painful. It will elicit anger, rage, distress, evoke more questions, and rightfully so. The video footage contains graphic and violent images and may be intense and traumatic for some to watch. But greater transparency is necessary in making meaningful changes in our city and to keep our offices, institutions, and departments accountable. But nothing is solved with more destruction and harm to our communities, neighborhoods, and local businesses in the process. Please know that further vandalism and destruction will only reinforce claims by outsiders that this transparency leads to violence in the first place. We need to show that those claims are wrong, but it will require all of us working together. We know this moment is incredibly painful, given so many failures over generations to protect all of Philadelphia's residents, especially those who are black or brown. As we continue making measurable steps towards building equity, inclusivity, and public safety in our city, releasing this footage is a step, but also an indication of this failure. Seeing another life tragically lost yet again to police violence can make many of us question whether anything has changed or whether anything will ever change. But this is why we are releasing this footage, because things have to change, and they are changing. And it starts with our willingness to be transparent and hold ourselves accountable. Together we can show that shining a light on this issue will in fact usher in a new day that brings us greater trust, healing, and peace in our city and within our communities. The stakes are very high, and the world is watching. With this release, the world will see we are engaging in an open process, a process that acknowledges the harm our actions have caused, a process that helps our communities begin to recover and heal through this process. It is essential to be aware of the significant impact trauma has on the well-being of our residents and the community as a whole. I encourage all of our residents to practice self-care during this time and get the help that they need. Mental health resources are available 24 hours, 7 days a week through the Community Behavioral Health member services at 1-888-545-2600. Again, that's 1-888-545-2600. In a few moments, we'll hear from Dr. Jill Bowen, Acting Commissioner of the Department of Behavioral Health and Intellectual Disability Services. She and Police Commissioner Outlaw are announcing a series of initiatives that will improve the coordination between their two departments. Some of it is work that is already in progress, but that we're stepping up. Some of it represents new and important changes. All of it will ensure that the tragic death of Walter Wallace Jr. will not be in vain. We will learn from our failings, and we will do better. Commissioner Outlaw.
Good afternoon. Without a doubt, the past 9 days have been very difficult for all Philadelphians. As police officers, the use of deadly force is unequivocally one of the most difficult decisions we may have to make in our careers. It is a decision that is not taken lightly due to the instantaneous and long-lasting effects of such actions and the ripple effect that the loss of life has on those directly and indirectly linked to the event. Many of you have questions about what transpired during the October 26th shooting incident, which is why we are here today. To be quite honest, though, I will not be able to answer many of your questions because the incident is still active through 2 concurrent investigations, the DA's office and our own internal affairs unit. There are laws, policies, and procedures that must be adhered to in order to ensure that a fair and comprehensive investigation is conducted. With that said, in keeping with our joint effort with the Mayor's Office to increase transparency with our internal investigations, we have decided to release body camera footage of last week's incident. This is the first time in our department's history that we have publicly released body cam footage for an officer-involved shooting. We are also releasing 911 calls and the associated dispatch radio call to the officers leading up to that incident. While this is not a milestone to be celebrated, we truly believe that this is an important step in our commitment to transparency. The release of this footage has been very carefully considered with the safety of the officers and the community in mind. Today, we are making available the body camera footage of the 2 officers that discharged their firearms on Monday, October 26. The videos will show the officers' arrival on scene, the interaction between the parties involved that led to the shooting itself, all the way up to the point where Mr. Wallace is placed into the back of a patrol car for transport to Presbyterian Hospital. The 2 officers involved in Monday's shooting are 25-year-old police officer Sean Matarazzo, badge number 4247 of the 18th District, and 26-year-old police officer Thomas Munns, badge number 5128, also assigned to the 18th District. Officer Matarazzo has been with the department since 2018, and Officer Munns has been with the department since 2017. I want to also reiterate how officer-involved shootings are investigated by our department. There are 2 separate units within the department that handle investigations surrounding officer-involved shootings. They are the Officer-Involved Shootings Investigations Unit, OISI, and our Internal Affairs Bureau, IAB. The Officer-Involved Shooting Investigations Unit, or OISI, and IA are 2 separate bifurcated processes. OISI looks at any criminal actions that may have occurred during the shooting, while IAB looks at departmental violations that may have occurred during the incident. IAB does not get involved in the OISI process, but they do shadow the OISI investigation to determine if any violations of departmental policies occurred. The DA's office and OISI work together to determine whether officers will be charged criminally based on the findings of the investigation. Once OISI completes their investigation, then IAB determines what, if any, departmental policies were violated. Because there are many factors that can extend an investigation, such as the number of officers on the scene, number of body-worn camera footage, video, number of civilian witnesses, etc., it is very difficult to put a timeline on how long the investigation may take. However, the PPD does work to ensure that these investigations are conducted in a timely and thorough manner. Once the IA investigation is completed, the Use of Force Review Board, the UFRB, makes a determination on whether the officer violated departmental policy specific to the shooting. If violations are found, IA then forwards their report to the Police Board of Inquiry, or the PBI. The PBI determines whether the officer will be charged with departmental policy violations. When disciplinary action is proposed, the officer has the right to go in front of the PBI for a hearing. The police commissioner, or myself, can then decide whether or not to agree with the findings of the PBI or take direct action, which can include increasing the penalty for the offense or termination. I want to reiterate how tragic this incident has been. As an organization that strives for continuous improvement, we have been implementing new programs to increase our effectiveness and improve our responses when servicing the community. One of these ways has been by dedicating a significant amount of time to scenario training that involves de-escalation techniques. While in the police academy, officers received or receive de-escalation training. This de-escalation training teaches officers effective tactical options that can be used in hazardous situations without endangering themselves or other members of the community. This training utilizes scenarios with 40 hours of instruction. In addition to the 40 hours of training using tactical de-escalation techniques during varying scenarios, recruit officers also receive 16 hours of tactical de-escalation training specific to vehicle investigations or vehicle stops. Additionally, the PPD has been working on continuous improvement through a joint effort with the Department of Behavioral Health. In 2007, we implemented the Crisis Intervention Team, or the CIT program. On September 28th of this year, we began working with the Department of Behavioral Health, or DBH, to develop a mechanism to better identify crisis calls that are received through 911, not just mental health calls to our existing resources, which are our 3,100 CIT officers in the field. In October of 2020, the city announced the first step to begin building out its 911 triage and co-responder program, which is designed to connect residents experiencing behavioral health crises to the timely support that they need. In this model, a behavioral health specialist from the Department of Behavioral Health and Intellectual Disability Services, or DBH-IDS, is embedded into police radio. This was done for the first time in the department's history. Under the new program, when behavioral health crises calls come into dispatch from police radio, embedded clinical staff will work alongside dispatchers to determine the most appropriate response for these calls. Once established, the triage desk will also take calls from patrol and other district officers when they encounter a situation in the community that requires behavioral health intervention. We've talked before about the implicit bias training that the department is bringing. I think it's also very important. In addition to the implicit bias training, we're also bringing something called ABLE. It's active bystandership for law enforcement. Active bystandership for law enforcement training really focuses on the duty to intervene. These two trainings are not only ongoing, but we also believe this is a significant move forward to help us offset when we encounter incidents like we did back on the 26th. Furthermore, our dispatchers will begin training next week for a modified CIT program. This crisis intervention team class will provide 911 call takers and dispatchers with a better ability to identify crisis-related calls so that these calls are more efficiently directed to CIT-trained officers in the field. In addition to this, we will be implementing a decision tree, or a set of questions that help our radio or our dispatchers identify or ask probative questions to those calling 911 to help us identify those in crisis if they don't necessarily offer that information to us voluntarily. We expect that all of our dispatchers will be CIT trained by the fall of 2021. Lastly, while our department continues to go through a period of change and improvement, I ask for your patience while we complete the officer-involved shooting investigation. You have my word that this investigation will be conducted fairly, unbiased, and honestly. We will conduct this investigation as quickly as possible. However, I do not have an exact timeline. With that, I will turn it over to Dr. Jill Bowen from DBH-IDS.
Thank you, Commissioner Outlaw. Good afternoon. The City of Philadelphia Department of Behavioral Health and Intellectual Disability Services shares in the sadness and grief that has swept our city. We stand in solidarity with those directly and indirectly impacted by systemic racism, injustice, and all the resulting trauma. We firmly believe that mental illness, disabilities, and substance use disorders are not crimes. Individuals affected by these challenges have the right to treatment, recovery, wellness, and life. DBH-IDS works for the people of this city so that all Philadelphians can thrive. We do this by partnering with public and private entities, including schools, city agencies, child welfare, housing, employment, and justice partners, including the police department, and a network of more than 200 community-based providers that offer prevention, intervention, and 24/7 crisis services. Our efforts to reduce stigma and increase behavioral health awareness within the public safety and criminal justice systems reach back for many years across numerous initiatives. You'll hear some of the initiatives that Commissioner Outlaw shared with you. You'll hear them from our perspective as well. That's what collaboration is. We have partnered with the police department to offer crisis intervention training since 2007, which emphasizes violence prevention, de-escalation, and community collaboration to more than 3,000 officers. The purpose of the training is to promote empathy and understanding while increasing effective communication with community members when they are in some of the most vulnerable phases of their life. The police department and DBHIDS will begin a modified CIT training class for 911 call takers and dispatchers starting next week. The class will provide dispatchers with improved ability to identify crisis-related calls so we can more efficiently direct these calls to CIT-trained officers in the field. DBHIDS and PPD have also been working together to provide mental health first aid training to new recruits since 2017. We also collaborated with law enforcement in 2017 to help launch several police-assisted diversion programs. DBHIDS, Criminal Justice and Public Safety in the Managing Director's Office, and the Police Department held leadership meetings over the last 2 years. These collaborative leadership meetings have brought about innovative initiatives, including PAD expansion and the 911 radio room pilot. These programs take a health-centered approach to law enforcement, diverting individuals towards supportive, peer-based social services that are customized to meet the participants' needs. DBHIDS has collaborated with the PAD program to launch a co-responder outreach pilot program in East Division that embeds behavioral health professionals with police officers, expected to expand to all of East Division by the end of this month. Behavioral health specialists respond in tandem with police to proactively engage individuals in the community to address quality of life-related concerns by offering connections to services and supports, including harm reduction services and facilitating health-centered outcomes. And more recently, DBHIDS partnered with the police department to launch the pilot program embedding a behavioral health navigator in the police 911 radio room. Since late September, a DBHIDS behavioral health navigator has been stationed with staff in the radio room to learn about the types of calls received, gathering information to refine the model, determine the amount and type of support needed, assist in the development of a curriculum for training, and help in the development of a script to support identification of behavioral health issues. The goal is to help 911 call takers better identify behavioral health-related calls. By January 2021, the innovative program is expected to move to a second pilot phase that will include intentional dispatch of crisis co-response teams. CIT officers will partner with civilian mental health experts to jointly respond to calls identified by police radio. The information gathered during the pilot phase will be used to help us further refine the model and determine the amount and type of support needed for the dispatch center going forward, including related to mobile crisis utilization and expansion. DBHIDS also has an existing protocol between the police department's 911 radio room and the 24/7 Philadelphia crisis line at DBHIDS. When callers express suicidal ideation, 911 dispatches an officer to the caller's location and immediately connects to the PCL to support de-escalation and, when necessary, dispatch a mobile crisis team. The existing mobile crisis teams are operationalized by two providers, Consortium and JFK. These teams allow DBHIDS to further connections with and between the community and the police department. We are committed to these teams and to finding ways to evolve these relationships. Shortly after this incident, DBHIDS began working within the West Philadelphia neighborhood to try to help those most affected by this traumatic event. We coordinate outreach with the Office of Violence Prevention. Our network of neighbors responding to violence coalition is actively coordinating with community members within West Philadelphia who have reached out for support and assistance. We will continue conversations with these community leaders to address the impact of this incident on individuals and the community as a whole. It is our deepest hope that initiatives such as these by DBHIDS and its provider partners, as well as other city departments and agencies, result in more individuals receiving the care they need. Sadly, the trauma is ongoing, not just for the people living in West Philadelphia, but for all of the individuals suffering under the weight of these multiple traumas, including those who may be viewing the video camera footage today. To all of those individuals, as well as those otherwise facing the trauma of systemic racism, COVID-19, isolation, financial stress, the divisiveness of the election, and more, we want to assure you that you are not alone. The City of Philadelphia and DBHIDS stand ready to help as we cope with this traumatic period. If you or a loved one are in need of supports and services, help is here. If you have questions about where to start and need guidance, please call our member services line. The mayor already noted it, but I will say it again, 888-545-2600. If more immediate crisis supports or mobile emergency intervention is needed, call our mental health hotline at 215-685-6440. The number is staffed by trained professionals 24 hours per day, 215-685-6440. If a community is experiencing heightened stress and anxiety, contact our Network of Neighbors team at networkofneighbors@phila.gov. We also encourage everyone to visit healthymindsphilly.org to take a free, quick, and anonymous behavioral health self-assessment. The online screenings help to identify signs and symptoms of behavioral health challenges proactively. And mindfultogether.com, that's mind, PHL, together.com, all one word, about other resources available to you. You're not alone. Help is here. Thank you. District Attorney present.
Thank you. Before I say a few words on this important topic, I just want to recognize all the clergy who are here, and they are here for good reasons. Three of them will have brief comments after mine. I'm sure they'll say something more useful than what I'm going to say. We have with us Pastor Mark Tyler of the Mother Bethel African Methodist Episcopal Church. We have Archbishop Mary Floyd Palmer of the Philadelphia Council and Clergy, who will also say a few words. Pastor Harold Clay is here. Where'd he go? There he is. From Mount Zion Baptist Church, we have Pastor Carl Day, who is right behind me, Culture Changing Christians Church. Pastor Donald Moore from Mount Carmel Baptist Church. Pastor Robert Collier, who is the president of the Black Clergy of Philadelphia. And we also have two clergy who are employees of the Philadelphia District Attorney's Office. They are Gregory Holston, who is a senior advisor in the office, and G. Lamar Stewart, who is our director of outreach and also a police officer. If I may, I just want to say a few words. I think it's important to understand a couple things. In some ways, maybe it's curious that we're having this conference in the middle of an election count because, as I understand it, we have more votes than at any point in the history of this country over the last 100 years at least. People give a vote. Tens of millions, maybe hundreds of millions of people give their vote, and they give it for something. And what they give it for is a government that will provide protection from pandemics, sometimes protection from foreign invasion. But they also give it for a government that will protect them when their child, who has mental illness and cannot be blamed for that, needs intervention from government of some source. Well, I am part of government, and I don't think there's any dispute that in this particular situation, when a mother was trying to get help with a situation involving her son, who is blameless for having mental illness, that when she did that, government failed because her son was killed within a minute of government's arrival. As a part of government, I apologize for that. I think what occurred here is heartbreaking. I know that the mayor feels that way. I've heard him on that. I know the police commissioner feels that way. I've heard her on that, and I think everyone who has even seen the video that has been available on social media from a civilian knows that this is truly a heartbreaking situation. So the question then is, how does government not fail now? What can we do now not to fail? Well, I was not involved in any of the discussions about these new programs, policies, trainings. I applaud the city, the police commissioner, the Department of Behavioral Health for their attempts to immediately wrestle with this, for some of those efforts even predating when this occurred. I think that is a positive step in the right direction towards protecting us. When the issue of the release of this body-worn camera video was raised, I also think that the mayor, his staff, the police commissioner, and I and my staff decided we were going to give this family protection this time. We were going to listen to them. And this is crucial. We were going to listen to them when they said, I want these audio tapes released, and I want video up to a certain point, but this is my child, and I don't want video after that point released to the public. I want the public to see absolutely everything without blurring anything for the portion that we believe is appropriate, but I do not want this other part to be shared with the public at this time. We have protected that family. We have done here exactly what they asked us to do, to be transparent, but also to protect their privacy in a moment of tragedy that is devastating this family. No one is hiding anything here. And in that sense, even though there has been a failure to protect this family, we are not failing to protect them now by doing this. I know that the police commissioner has promised, and I believe she will deliver, a fair and impartial investigation on the part of the police department. I have a separate duty, and that is to deliver a fair and impartial investigation on the possibility of criminal charges. The charging function is not with the police department. The charging function is with the district attorney's office. It either comes when that is a possibility, based upon an assessment made that there is probable cause, reviewing, of course, all the investigative work done by the police department, or sometimes it comes from a grand jury. And the grand jury actually makes the charging decision after they're allowed to consider charges suggested by the DA's office. In both homicide cases where the district attorney's office has found it necessary to charge a police officer who was on duty when he killed a civilian, in both of those cases, it was a grand jury that carefully considered the evidence over a long period of time and made that decision. There were many other cases where the district attorney's office did not charge police officers in shootings, fatal or not, because the facts and the law did not support it. We are going to protect this family in the integrity of the investigation that the district attorney's office is going to do, and in trying to get justice, whatever that may look like when we know everything, at the end of the day. The other thing that government needs to do to protect here is we need to protect the privacy of this family. The family having requested a video that does show faces of witnesses, I would ask everyone in the public and in the press to honor that. Many of those witnesses are family members. They are neighbors. They do not need your camera in their face. So I would ask you to honor that, and I would ask the same of the public. If there is a need to march and there is a need to protest, I would ask you not to march down that block without permission and from that family, without respecting that family. And I would also ask all of you in the public who cannot help but be affected by this, because it is a painful thing to see. It is a terrible tragedy for everyone who is up here. I would ask all of you to protect us from violence in the street, as we, the government, try to do that as well, and to protect us from business people's windows being shattered and their things being taken. We know this city. We know that this is a city that values free speech, free expression, free protest that is peaceful. I heard this today when I sat with the father of Walter Wallace, and we spoke about it. He respects that. This is a man who has worked for the city of Philadelphia over 30 years. He loves this city, and he has already said to the cameras days ago that he does not want to see this city torn up. Well, just as government tries to protect us from the city being torn up, what we need is the public who view this, who feel passionately about this, to feel just as passionately about protecting this family and honoring the memory of Walter Wallace by not tearing up the city. If you believe the life of Walter Wallace matters, then it matters that his family is asking you to honor him, not to disgrace his memory by tearing up the city. I would now like to ask in the following order: first, Pastor Mark Tyler; next, Archbishop Mary Floyd Palmer; and finally, Black Clergy President Robert Collier to say a few words. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. District Attorney, and I want to speak today on behalf of Power, Live Free, our effort, which is interfaith and interracial, works among other issues on police accountability. You were talking about the election just a moment ago, and one of the things that was on the ballot this year was whether or not Philadelphia should have independent police oversight. I'm hopeful that when the ballots are counted, that will have passed, and that might usher us into a new era of policing in the 21st century. I want to echo the concerns for the family of Walter Wallace. We had a chance to meet his mother and father the night that he was killed. I want to pray for his wife, his children, his siblings. I can only imagine the kind of grief that they must be going through and the kind of agony that will accompany the release of this video that will go viral instantly. They won't be able to turn on the television or the internet, the radio. So I would certainly ask, in addition to everything else that's been said, that we might give them space so they might heal in this moment. They've not even buried their son yet. And I think we ought to keep that in mind. But the truth is that Walter Wallace should be alive today. And I know that an investigation will happen, but I cannot help but stand here and think about the fact that 5 years ago, with several of the clergy that are standing here, we sat in a room not too far from here when the Department of Justice came to Philadelphia to report on the use of force, use of deadly force. And in that long statement with 40-some-odd findings and 90-plus recommendations, a number of things that they said then, if they had been adhered to at the time, Walter Wallace would likely be alive today. They suggested that young officers on the force should be partnered at all times with an older, more seasoned officer. I believe the video will support that if there was an older officer on the scene, that perhaps Walter Wallace would be alive today. Suggested that tasers that are not non-lethal, but they are less lethal, that if those had been in the possession of all officers at that moment, plan that I believe Commissioner Ramsey left as a 4-year plan, that the 2 officers who were not equipped with tasers, if they had adhered to what the plan said 5 years ago, Walter Wallace would be alive today. And I want to suggest to you that we need more than just implicit bias training. We need to be honest about racism and the ways in which black people and black men in particular are viewed in this country, oftentimes by law enforcement. That an encounter, even with a knife in your hand, that if you look like someone else other than a black man, you oftentimes will survive that incident. We got to talk about that, and beyond talking about it, we've got to address it. And so our hope is that we will not be satisfied with superficial changes. We're glad that the Frank Rizzo statue is gone, but we need the culture that Frank Rizzo embodied to be gone from policing in Philadelphia. We don't need to stand here again for another Walter Wallace or David Jones or Brandon Tate Brown or insert whatever name you want here. And so we're grateful that transparency is happening today. This video is hard to watch, so I want to warn you, it's very traumatizing. And for many of us, we've seen too many of them. But I believe that this is in the best interest of everyone so that we can face it. In the words of a great preacher friend, that if we don't face it, we can't fix it. And so let's work together and bring about real accountability and real change and real reform in Philadelphia policing. Thank you.
To Mr. Mayor, Madam Commissioner, elected and appointed officials, and to the host of this press conference, Mr. District Attorney, as well as my colleagues yoked to proclaim the gospel and to provide pastoral comfort and care. I am standing before you as a lifelong citizen of Philadelphia, born in the early 60s, who has gone through a myriad of leadership, not only for the police department, but for the city of Philadelphia. I've seen the gang wars, I've seen the uprisings, I've seen neighborhoods torn apart, I've seen even some of the anger that's been exhibited that's been more detrimental for the children that are watching us as adults. As a mother of 4 sons, I have the first C word, compassion. I cannot say how I would feel if it were my son. I can only say that my heart bleeds for and goes out to and embraces the hurt, the pain, the trauma that the parents, the wife, the kids, and family members have felt by the loss of Walter. His life mattered. Whether we agree or disagree, God created him, and he should be here today. I'm also recognizing that mistakes happen, and apologies have been extended. I'm sorries, and all of those things that may be little comfort right now in the heightened of this moment. And so I'm hoping that we will do number 2. We will not only say it, but show our care. To the press and everybody else, I know that this is something folks have a tendency to grab hold on and run away with. But let's do what we can in this moment to not only show the compassion, but to exhibit the care. Because a month from now, when all of the press is gone, and all of the groups that have so much to say may dissipate, we still have to exhibit care. That's what pastors and those that are faith leaders do. And so I'm asking that we will not only do the compassion, we will be sure about our care and how we give it to everyone, but we will do number 3. We will also be cautious. It has already been expressed that this video is difficult to watch. I can't tell you personally how many times I've closed my eyes while praying and I've seen different phases of it. And I would call out to the God I know that the trauma in just viewing it would be able to ease the mind of those that will now see it There will be many that will take clip and slip and may use it to incite. But I'm calling on the citizens of Philadelphia, in a city I love, I've been in all my life. Be cautious before you act. Be careful about what you do to those who have absolutely nothing to do with this. Care about your community enough to wait until the process that is ongoing is resolved, and then give an appropriate response. So, in closing, I will ask you, please be compassionate. The family is coming to the funeral on Saturday. And if it were your family member, you would want the same level of privacy and integrity. Show some care, not to extort or to publicize for any grand reason, but caring about their feelings. And lastly, be cautious in all of your responses. God is watching. So are our children. What will they say about what you've done? Hopefully, they'll be able to say, I'm proud of what you have done. Thank you.
Needless to say, we are living in a difficult time. We've had trauma all around us for the past 2 weeks or more. But I stand here to ask all the citizens of Philadelphia and its surrounding counties, and everybody who hears my voice, please, please do not resort to any violence, any violent demonstrations, any outcry of anything that would destroy our city, our state, and any city. And remember that we must honor the memory of Walter Wallace, be sensitive to the needs of the family. Do not be chaotic and destroy. I'm calling on all the members of the black clergy to talk with their faith communities, to talk with their congregants, and instill in everyone that we come in contact with to be calm, to allow the system to do what the system has promised to do. Do not take matters into your own hands. I know that there's a heightened sense of hurt. We're all hurting, but we must learn to channel that hurt in a positive way. We of the faith community believe that there is a God, and we trust him. So we must trust the process, allow it to go through and do what it said it would do, and let us be what we have been called to be. Be patient, be vigilant, and watch and have each other's back. And once you have seen this video, and I know you'll be traumatized, so those of you who will need counseling, please seek it. Don't take your anger out on what you see. And as it has been said before, it's going to be repetitive. So you'll probably wake up in the middle of the night still seeing this. Don't let that cause you to do anything negative. But if you are a member of the family of God, pray that the Lord will cause you not to react in a violent manner. Save our city, save our state, and save our country. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I don't know if you wanted to field questions. I know that we're going to be read to questions that are coming in, not only questions in the room like Mr. Cuellar, but we're going to be getting questions over Zoom, which will be read by Jane Rowe. Did you want to start out?
Mr. Mayor, residents continue to ask, as the faith leader alluded to, when you will expedite, secure the funding to ensure that all of our officers are equipped and trained in the use of tasers to help prevent these kinds of tragedies? We're
in conversations now with City Council for potential mid-year transfer of money enough to equip. A lot of the expenditures, these tasers have a certain life expectancy, and some of them had to be replaced. And it's not just the taser itself; it's the holster for the taser, it's the charger for the taser. So it's not just a simple $75 or $100 taser. Other things that come with it. We have been appropriating money since I've been mayor for the police budget to buy them. Of course, we need to speed it up and make sure everybody is trained to use it.
And this pilot program with the Department of Behavioral Health, will that be a 24/7 operation?
Right now, it's in the pilot phase where they're gathering information to help the officers and the dispatchers learn the best way to elicit the answers to those questions. And then we are working on what the next steps would be based on the pilot to see about what could happen in terms of the 24/7. What we're really looking forward to is the rollout at the early beginning of January of the co-response teams, because that will really make a difference in terms of having mental health and police, CIT-trained police together in the field.
And we've also been doing something like that with police-assisted diversion in the Kensington area for people who are addicted to drugs and or mentally ill. As opposed to arresting them, we've been able to divert people to treatment, to mental health treatment and to addiction treatment, as opposed to arresting them and giving them a record.
Mr. Krasner, have you handled the grand jury as part of your investigation?
Mr. Cuellar, if I had, I would not be permitted to speak about it. So I can't answer that question, but I certainly understand why you are curious about that. All that I can tell you is that each one of these cases, by which I mean a situation in which an officer has been involved in the killing of a civilian, has to be considered very seriously. There are some cases in which my office would not have supported the release of the video because that might have jeopardized the investigation. This happens to be a case where there is no danger of jeopardizing the investigation by releasing it at this point. And just as I have to make those kinds of decisions on a case-by-case basis, the decision to use a grand jury or not is very, very case-specific and also protected by certain laws, so I'm not actually allowed to discuss the details of that.
In a decision where, or in a situation where we're all going to be able to follow with such clarity, can you just speak to what other evidence you would need to come to a decision in charge? What else was this question?
Well, I don't want to get too much into the specifics here, but I understand the point of your question. And I can say this to you without speaking about this case. If you look at the video of George Floyd, which goes on for about 9+ minutes, you have a video of someone who is, for the most part, on the ground, who has no weapon whatsoever. You have a ton of evidence that comes out of that video that puts a prosecutor in position to charge more quickly than you have in a situation that involves forensics, that may involve additional medical evidence that is necessary, that may involve the interviews of witnesses who have not even been spoken to by the police because, for example, they chose to call the DA's hotline instead. They didn't feel comfortable talking to police for whatever reason, and I'm not judging the police department in any way. But I think we have been pretty clear, not in our words, but in our actions and our record, that in these kinds of cases, sometimes we have to move slowly, but we are unafraid, when it is appropriate, to either refuse charges or to bring charges. That much I think I can say. Are there any other questions? The request is for the spelling the names of the officers.
In the meantime, Larry, can you just, you spoke about how you went and spoke with the family about releasing the video, what kind of parameters will be. Are you going to speak with the family and kind of take into consideration their supposed wish not to have the police officers charged? You're going to have to take that into account as well?
We always take into account the wishes of survivors and victims. We agree with them many times. We don't agree with them all the time. Ours is a system in which victims and survivors do not get to decide whether or not criminal charges should be brought, but they should always have input, and that input should always be taken seriously for a lot of good reasons. So are we going to consider it? Absolutely. We're going to consider it. We're going to consider it in light of what information they have and to what extent they have specific knowledge of what the criminal statutes are, or if we're able to explain it to them and they feel comfortable with that, what their opinion is at that point, we're going to take all of that very seriously, yes. Yes, sir, Mensa.
In your remarks, you used the phrase police violence, and violence is equated or linked to crime. I just want for clarity.
Well, the taking of a life is a violent act. Whether that act is appropriate or not is what this whole investigation will determine. But I'm not necessarily making any allusions to criminality. I'm just saying that watching that video is it's a violent act you're watching, and it's the act that resulted in the taking of a life. So, in that regard, yes. But look, I have two children about the same age, and the fact that they're both white probably keeps them safer than if I were a black man with two black children that age. And I don't understand it fully because I never lived it, but I try to understand it as best I can from what people have told me. But I can't imagine how I would even begin to handle the death of either of my children in this manner or in any manner. But I can't imagine what these parents, brothers, sisters are going through and how they're processing it. It's a very traumatic experience for them and for everyone who is involved and who's watched the video.
Quick question, Mayor, or I don't know if the doctor can speak to this, but how many behavioral units are you speaking of that you have throughout the city that can respond?
Do you want to take that?
I don't know who can.
So I have my colleague here. He's Dr. Sosamulu Shoyinka, who is the Chief Medical Officer for DBH IDEA, so we'll let him take that.
Thank you. We have currently 2 adult mobile crisis teams operational in the city. Those teams are operated by JFK and the consortium.
And then who assists them to go out? Is that that's the smaller concept, the 911 center, and that's dispatched?
Yes, those teams are dispatched by the Philadelphia Crisis Line.
Are those teams 24/7?
The JFK team is 24/7. The consortium team has 2 shifts at this time.
I have a question for Commissioner Outlaw.
Excuse me.
For Commissioner Preston with tasers. I don't know if it was Oliver already, but what percentage of officers currently have tasers?
So approximately we have about 2,300 tasers deployed to get everyone that's working in operations with the taser. That requires about 4,500 tasers. 4,500. So we currently have 2,300, and in order for everyone in operations to have one, we'd need 4,500, 4,500. So we've made, as the upcoming year, every year we've asked for approximately $900,000 to buy additional tasers. Every year that's been approved by the council. We do have that in our upcoming budget, and we expect in the next few years, because it's basically 5 years to get everyone outfitted, and we do have plans to make that ask with each additional year.
And finally, in many departments, police have other non-lethal weapons like beanbag guns, which is like
The flexible batons. Mm-hmm.
and also there's like the net guns, where you shoot net for somebody. Any plans on expanding your non-lethal arsenal?
Yes, so I've asked our training division to look into exactly that. So you're making, some folks refer to them as beanbag rounds, or the flexible batons, in which it's deployed from a vessel that looks like a shotgun. A lot of departments paint it like a fluorescent color so it's not to get confused with an actual shotgun. There's also, I don't want to give free advertisement, but what you're talking about with the net, that is a product out there. I am familiar with some agencies that have piloted it. I'm familiar with some agencies that have piloted that product and have not gone forward to use it. So there are several options, I think, that we need to be exploring in addition to the taser, because we're talking a lot about the taser, but I don't want us to put all of our hope and faith into one particular model of control. And for the person that asked, or for everyone. The first officer, 26-year-old police officer Thomas, common spelling Thomas, Munz, Munz as in zebra. And then Officer Matarazzo, Sean Matarazzo, Seanmatarazzo. It's the spelling of the names. What's that? 25-year-old. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much.